an idea that should be echoed throughout the world, because I would like to think that we are all free individuals. But what they have done is they've systematically set up to destroy it. And when you talked about Nancy Pelosi, you know, the corruption in Washington, D.C. and Ottawa, too, runs deep. And once you start to go down the rabbit hole and look at the facts and see the connections, you truly will be blown away. Chris Dodd, who's the Democratic senator who's the head of the United States Banking Committee, received more funds from Countrywide Banking. Now, Barack Obama, who preaches about change and talks about how we're going to bring change to the world and we're going to bring change to the United States, got more funding from Goldman Sachs, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, AIG, you know, all the banks. Now, how can you be about change and be about the people when you're getting, you know, funding from the same, you know, corrupt cartels that have systematically destroyed, you know, the finance system that we have around the world, and have come, you know, forth to say we need more rules in this new world financing organization? Well, no, you guys have done your part to destroy it, you know, and people aren't looking at what's actually taking place. I mean, we have watched, and in history, depending on who writes the books, because we all know it's he who wins the wars writes the books, history, if the war is run by the right people, will hopefully show that from September to the end of October to now and continuously, the American people and the people of the world have been lied to about what the problem is. That we're experiencing right now is financially. And I want to talk about this because what is taking place right now is the next 9/11. Yeah, we might have a terrorist attack down the road that involves bombs, but right now we're watching right in front of our very eyes the next terrorist attack take place, and it is called a financial coup. Goldman Sachs, in 1999, Hank Paulson, lobbied Bill Clinton to create the National Economic Revitalization Act or Revitalization Program. I'm not sure what the name of it is. But essentially what it did was it set up to allow the lending to ninjas, no income, no job, no assets, people who really couldn't afford the loans. But what it also did was it changed the rules for investment funds or investment banks. Instead of having 4% of your capital on hand when you loan people money, they brought it down to 3% on hand. So, you know, all these banks only had to have 3% on hand when they loaned it out. Now, after 9/11 took place, Alan Greenspan artificially lowered the interest rates to a low that was, had set up the what we're experiencing today. The foundation was laid in 99 by Hank Paulson and Bill Clinton. The September 11th came in. Alan Greenspan lowered the interest rates and set the plan in motion. All these people bought jobs, or bought homes, you know, with the thought of that if they invest $5,000, they can flip it for $60,000, which is asinine to think that would continue on for a long period of time. And you had all these banks and these major institutions lend all these people money, knowing what was taking place. And then they turn around and say, well, you know, it's the people that are borrowing the money's fault. Well, no, because you set up the laws to encourage predatory lending practices, and you set up the laws to encourage all these people got jobs. But what you also did is you set up the trade deals that ensured that their jobs would disappear because of their benefits and the high cost of their labor, and that their jobs would disappear overseas, and they're not necessarily coming up to Canada, although we're blamed for taking jobs, but we're losing our own. They would go to Mexico, or they would go over to Asia. And so, I mean, we've watched a terrorist attack take place on the United States, which is going to affect all of us. And I think it's really important that people start to put all the pieces of the puzzle together and see how, you know, it all plays a role, and how the intelligence agencies of the CIA, you know, are really there to enlist perpetual war and have perpetual war, because that creates money. Because if all of a sudden Ron Paul was elected in the United States, and the first thing he did was say, we're going to pull all our soldiers out of every base around the world. Well, that's 183 bases that are around the world. That almost every country in the world has a United States military base. So he says that we're going to pull all these guys out and we're going to bring them back home. And then we're going to, you know, patrol our borders so we don't let the illegal immigrants come in here, and you have to come in through the front door instead of the back door. Well, all of a sudden, all these major corporations like Rand, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, the bullets manufacturers are no longer making money because nobody's getting shot and killed. I mean, and that's huge. It is an industry that produces money and profit, and we're watching the next step. I mean, just like your book, we're watching the rise of the Fourth Reich, and we're watching it run right in front of our eyes. And I hope that people, good Americans like Cindy Sheehan and Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul and Virgil Goode, all these people who are trying to alarm the warning bells, get people to wake up, to realize that, 9/11 was a military coup by KBR, Halliburton, Blackwater, the intelligence agency. This financial global depression that we're heading into, and it is a global depression, was a financial coup, started by J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and Goldman Sachs and the same people that have done it throughout history. And we as people have got to warn other people about what is taking place.
That's so true there, James. That's James Flack for our listening audience, if you want to know who's speaking right now. And my name is Reginald Angus Argue, and you're listening to Co-op Radio 102.7 FM, Monday Brown Bagger. And James, there's one thing that you were talking to me about. You were talking about Goldman Sachs, and you're also talking about the Bank of Canada. How is Goldman Sachs tied in with the Bank of Canada?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, Reg, because I just listened to the Alex Jones show. And for your listeners, they should check out Infowars.com and check out the Alex Jones show, and and listen to what he has to say, and then do your own independent research. But Goldman Sachs, the Bank of Canada governor, is a 42-year-old. His name is Mark J. Carney. He's Harvard educated, Oxford educated, so I'm guessing he's probably got a Rhodes Scholarship, just like Bill Clinton. And when he graduated from university, he's born out of Northwest Territories. He went to work for Goldman Sachs. He worked at Goldman Sachs for 13 years under Hank Paulson with Neil Kashkari. Now, what's interesting is if you step back as a normal person and you say, well, there's no conspiracy there, on behalf of the corporation. You have Hank Paulson, who's the head of the United States Treasury, who worked for Ben Bernanke, who used to be at Goldman Sachs. And you have Hank Paulson, who's in charge of the North American Development Bank. You have Neil Kashkari, who used to work at Goldman Sachs, who's now in charge of the dole-out of the bankers' bailout. You have Mark J. Carney, who's an ex-executive who worked there for 13 years. That's an interesting number if you're, following numbers. 13 years at Goldman Sachs, who now is the Bank of Canada governor, which was a total surprise to the people of Bank of Canada. Hank Paulson is also in charge of the North American Development Bank, which is under the SVP, which will probably become the North American Federal Reserve when the North American Union comes into play. The Italian central banker is a Goldman Sachs exec. So basically, essentially, if you look, and the European Bank is run by a ex-Goldman Sachs executive as well. I can't remember his name. So if you look, all key top financial positions around the world are filled by former and a Goldman Sachs executives. That's not right, especially when you look at what Hank Paulson did in '99 with Bill Clinton, laying the foundation for the subprime mortgage crisis that we have today. So, I mean, it shows that there's corruption on a huge scale in which millions of people are going to be defrauded. They're going to be robbed of their 401ks in the United States, their RRSPs up here in Canada. Mutual funds are going to collapse. And it's going to be worse than the Depression. And then, I'm watching the Canadian news, and they're lying to us outright. They're not telling us what really is going on or what's coming our way. And as Canadians, we should be outraged at, the CBC and CanWest Global and, Chorus Radio Network, because they're not telling you, the Canadian population, the Canadian people, what really is coming our way. Anybody who doesn't think that what's happening in the States is not going to affect us up here is not paying attention. 90% of our export industry is based on the economy of the United States. The economy of the United States is not going to look the same in a year. City Financial has announced in the last week that they are laying off 70,000 people.